The crystal spires of the Villani Council building trembled as another shockwave rippled through space. Chancellor Myra pressed a six-fingered hand against the viewing wall, watching the holographic display that showed the death of yet another world. The planet Zalara had been a garden paradise just 3 days ago, home to 12 billion peaceful Villani citizens. Now it was nothing but gray dust floating in the void. "Show me the sensor readings again," Myra whispered, her blue skin turning almost white with fear. The central hologram flickered, displaying the terrifying efficiency of the Korthak swarm. Millions of organic ships, each the size of a city block, had descended on Zalara like metallic locusts. They didn't just destroy the planet. They consumed it. Every building, every tree, every grain of soil was broken down into base materials and absorbed by the swarm. Even the atmosphere had been stripped away, leaving behind a lifeless rock. Elder Tane stumbled into the chamber, his ceremonial robes torn and his usual calm demeanor shattered. "Chancellor, we just lost contact with Macon Station. The outer defense grid is completely gone." The assembled representatives, beings from a dozen peaceful species that had never known true war, began to panic. Whispered conversations filled the chamber as the horrible reality set in. The Korthak swarm was unstoppable, and it was heading directly toward their core worlds. How long until they reached Villani Prime? Myra asked, though she dreaded the answer. 8 days, maybe less, replied Commander Zeno, the head of a pathetically small defense force. "Our ships are designed for exploration and rescue operations, not combat. We have energy shields and evacuation protocols, but against something like this..." He gestured helplessly at the hologram, showing the swarm's relentless advance. Myra closed her eyes and tried to think. The Villani Republic had survived for 3,000 years through diplomacy, trade, and careful neutrality. They had never needed weapons of war because they had never encountered anything that couldn't be reasoned with or avoided. The galaxy had always been a place of order and logic, where conflict were resolved through negotiation and compromise. But the Korthak swarm didn't negotiate. They didn't communicate. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. "What about our allies?" asked Elder Tane. "The Centauri Federation? The Andorian Trade Union?" "Already contacted," Zeno replied grimly. "The Federation is evacuating their border worlds. The Androians are trying to negotiate a peace treaty." He laughed bitterly. "They are offering the swarm mineral rights in exchange for being left alone." Myra felt her heart sink. Every major power in the galaxy was either running or trying to appease these monsters. No one was willing to fight. "There is one option," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "One we haven't considered." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to their chancellor. "The quarantine zone," she continued. "Sol system. The death world." The reaction was immediate. Several representatives actually stepped backward, while others made gestures to ward off evil spirits. The Sol system was legendary throughout the galaxy, but not in a good way. It was a place of violence and chaos, home to creatures so dangerous that the Galactic Council had banned all contact centuries ago. "You can't be serious," Elder Tane stammered. "The stories about that planet. They say the dominant species there actually fights wars for entertainment. They turn their own world's weather into weapons. They eat other living creatures and call it food." "I know the stories," Myra replied. "But right now, we need something the swarm has never faced before. We need violence. We need chaos. We need predators." She walked to the communication array and began composing the distress signal. Her hands shook as she included coordinates that had been forbidden for 3 centuries. The message was simple and desperate. "Urgent assistance required. Hostile force consuming inhabited worlds. Any species capable of military aid, please respond. Send it to every system in the galaxy," she ordered, including Sol. Meanwhile, on the 3rd planet of the Sol system, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Morrison was finishing his night shift at the North American Aerospace Defense Command. The massive underground facility hummed with activity as technicians monitored everything from satellite feeds to deep space communications. It was routine work, or at least it had been until his computer started screaming alerts. "What the hell?" Morrison muttered, pulling up the translation software. The message was unlike anything in Earth's databases, alien script that their best computers could barely decode. But the attached video footage made everything clear. He watched in stunned silence as entire worlds were stripped bare by swarms of organic spacecraft. The beings in the message looked almost human-like, but with blue skin and extra arms. They were clearly terrified, clearly desperate, and clearly dying. Morrison grabbed his phone and called Admiral Rebecca Hayes directly. Protocol be damned. This was bigger than chain of command. "Admiral, you need to see this now," he said when she answered. "We just received a distress call from aliens. Real aliens. And they're asking for help." 20 minutes later, Admiral Hayes stood in the NORAD command center, watching the alien footage with growing anger. The Villani were peaceful creatures being slaughtered by something that looked like a cross between army ants and battleships. Every human instinct for protecting the innocent was screaming at her to act. "How many ships can we mobilize?" she asked the staff. "For a deep space mission, maybe 12 vessels maximum," replied Captain Russ. "But Admiral, we don't know anything about their technology or combat capabilities." Hayes smiled grimly. "Captain, we're humans. We've been fighting wars since we figured out how to pick up rocks. I think we can handle some overgrown bugs." The countdown to humanity's first interstellar war had begun. Admiral Rebecca Hayes felt the familiar vibration of the UES Normandy as it cut through hyperspace at impossible speeds. The bridge around her buzzed with controlled energy, dozens of crew members at their stations, monitoring everything from engine output to weapon systems. This wasn't like the sterile, quiet bridges she'd seen in alien footage. This was a warship built by a species that understood violence. "Jump completion in 30 seconds," called out Navigator Lieutenant Ben Cooper from his station. "All ships reporting ready for combat operations." Hayes nodded, watching the tactical display that showed her modest fleet of 12 vessels. By galactic standards, they were laughably small. The largest ship, the Normandy herself, was barely 800 meters long. Most alien civilizations built kilometer-long dreadnoughts with enough firepower to crack planets. But humans had learned long ago that size wasn't everything in a fight. Beside her, Marine Colonel David Thompson studied the alien tactical data with the same cold focus that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Earth's most hostile training environments. The man had survived 2 weeks alone in the Australian Death Valley with nothing but a knife and basic rations. He'd built shelters in Antarctic storms and fought mock battles in the crushing depths of Earth's ocean trenches. "Look at this, Admiral," Thompson said, highlighting sections of the Villani defense reports. When the swarm attacked their outer colonies, the defenders raised energy shields and began evacuation procedures. Standard protocol was to retreat to prepared positions and wait for diplomatic contact. Hayes shook her head in amazement. They actually tried to negotiate with a hive mind that was eating their planets. "Gets worse," Thompson continued. When diplomacy failed, their fallback plan was to retreat further and send out distress calls. Not once did they consider counterattack. Not once did they try to hurt the enemy. Captain Lisa Martinez looked up from her intelligence station, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of multiple holographic displays. She'd spent the last 48 hours analyzing every piece of data the Villani had provided about the Korthak swarm, looking for patterns and weaknesses. "The swarm moves in 3 distinct phases," Martinez explained, pulling up a 3-dimensional battle map. "First, they send scout drones to map defensive positions. Second, they deploy harvester ships to begin consuming infrastructure. Third, the main swarm arrives to finish the job." "How long between phases?" Hayes asked. "About 6 hours for each phase. Very methodical, very predictable." Martinez zoomed in on footage of a swarm attack. They're like army ants back on Earth, incredibly efficient when following established patterns, but they don't adapt well to unexpected situations. Hayes studied the enemy formations with the eye of someone who'd spent 30 years learning how to kill things that wanted to kill her first. The swarm ships looked organic, almost grown rather than built. They moved in perfect coordination, following mathematical precision that no individual minds could achieve. They think like a computer, she realized. Input, process, output. They probably never face an enemy that didn't follow logical defensive protocols. Thompson grinned, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then they're in for a hell of a surprise. Humans don't do logical when we're angry. The bridge shuddered slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system. Immediately, the main screen lit up with tactical data as their sensors swept the area. What they found was both better and worse than expected. Multiple Villani ships detected, reported sensor operator Janakim. They are running defensive patrols around their homeworld, but staying well back from anything that looks like a fight. And the swarm? Hayes asked, though she could already see the answer on the tactical display. 3 light-years out and closing fast, Kim replied. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. Admiral, there are millions of them. Hayes felt that familiar tightness in her chest that came before every major battle. The odds were impossibly bad. 12 human ships against a swarm that had consumed entire star systems. By any logical analysis, they should retreat immediately and try to evacuate as many civilians as possible. But humans had never been particularly logical when it came to protecting innocents. All ships. This is Admiral Hayes, she announced over the fleet communication system. In 18 hours, we're going to face an enemy that has never lost a battle. They've conquered dozens of worlds and killed billions of innocent people. They think they're unstoppable because nobody has ever really fought back. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These were people who'd volunteered for humanity's first interstellar war mission, knowing they might never see Earth again. But here's what the swarm doesn't understand about humans, she continued. We didn't become the apex predators on our world by being bigger or stronger than everything else. We did it by being meaner, smarter, and more stubborn than anything that tried to eat us. We're about to remind this galaxy why Earth was quarantined in the first place. The fleet began moving into attack formation, not the rigid defensive lines favored by peaceful species, but the loose, aggressive patterns developed in Earth's war colleges. Each ship knew its role. Each captain understood the plan, and each crew member was ready to die rather than let these monsters reach another innocent world. Colonel Thompson, Hayes said quietly, prepare your Marines for boarding operations. We're going to take some prisoners. Thompson's smile became even more unsettling. With pleasure, Admiral. It's time these bugs learned what happens when they mess with a death world. The hunt was about to begin. The 12 human warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Villani Prime solar system, their angular hulls scarred from decades of combat exercises in Earth's asteroid belts. To the Villani watching on their long-range sensors, the Earth vessels looked primitive, no smooth curves or elegant designs like proper galactic ships. Instead, they were all sharp edges and weapon mounts, built for one purpose only. By the sacred lights, whispered communications officer Zara as she watched the human fleet on her display. They looked like they were designed to kill things. Chancellor Myra stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Peaceful Dawn Asterisk, watching the alien vessels approach. The human ships moved with a strange kind of grace, not the smooth, predictable flight patterns of civilized spacecraft, but something that reminded her uncomfortably of the hunting predators she'd seen in nature documentaries. They are not maintaining formation, observed Captain Cato nervously. Our ships always fly in perfect geometric patterns for maximum efficiency. These are scattered all over the system like they are stalking prey. Admiral Hayes appeared on the communication screen, her image crackling slightly through the translation matrix. She was smaller than most Villani, but something in her eyes made Myra's skin crawl with primitive fear. Those were the eyes of something that had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Chancellor Myra, Hayes said, her voice carrying an edge that cut through the peaceful diplomatic tone the Villani were used to. We need to meet immediately. My intelligence officer has analysis on the swarm's attack patterns, and we need to coordinate our defense. Defense? Myra repeated hopefully. Then you have a plan to evacuate our people. Hayes smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Chancellor, humans don't evacuate. We fight. An hour later, Myra and her senior advisors transported aboard the human flagship Normandy Star. The moment they materialized in the teleport chamber, they knew they were in an alien world. The corridors were too narrow, the lighting too harsh, and everything smelled of metal and machine oil. Worse, the humans they passed in the hallways moved like coiled springs, ready to explode into violence at any moment. Elder Tane clutched his ceremonial staff with trembling hands. These beings make my skin crawl, he whispered. Look at their teeth. They're designed for tearing flesh. And their eyes, They are positioned like predators, not civilized herbivores. The briefing room was a stark contrast of Alani meeting chambers with their soft lighting and comfortable meditation cushions. This was a room built for war planning, with harsh lights and tactical displays covering every wall. Admiral Hayes stood at the center, studying a three-dimensional hologram of Alani Prime that showed the planet divided into colored zones. The red zones indicate acceptable casualty areas, Hayes explained matter-of-factly, pointing to several major population centers. If we can force the swarm to attack there first, we can funnel them into killing zones where our weapons will be most effective. Elder Tane's blue skin turned almost white. You're planning to sacrifice our cities. I'm planning to save your species, Hayes corrected, her voice carrying the kind of cold authority that came from making life-and-death decisions for 30 years. Sometimes that requires sacrifice. Colonel Thompson stepped forward, activating another holographic display that showed swarm attack patterns from previous battles. The Marine's scarred hands moved over the controls with practiced ease as he highlighted enemy movements. The Korthek think like a hive mind, Thompson explained. Everything they do follows perfect logic and maximum efficiency. They've never faced an enemy that fights dirty, breaks rules, or uses tactics that don't make sense on paper. What kind of tactics? Myra asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Hayes and Thompson exchanged a look that made every Villani in the room step backward involuntarily. It was the look of predators who had found prey. Human tactics, Hayes said simply. We're going to show them what happens when prey evolves to fight back. Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarm system began blaring. Captain Martinez rushed into the briefing room, her face grim with urgency. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting massive gravimetric disturbances at the edge of the system. It's the swarm. They're arriving ahead of schedule. The main tactical display switched to show the outer system, where space itself seemed to be tearing open. Through the rifts came ships, millions of them, each one a living nightmare of organic technology and predatory design. The Korthak swarm looked like a plague of metallic locusts descending on everything in their path. Dear gods, Elder Tane whispered, watching the endless stream of enemy vessels pour into their system. There are so many of them. Hayes stepped to the communication panel and activated the fleet-wide channel. Her voice carried through every human ship in the system, reaching Marines in their barracks, pilots in their cockpits, and engineers in their weapon bays. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. Battle stations, all hands. We have incoming hostiles numbering in the millions. They think they are going to consume another peaceful world full of helpless prey. She paused, watching the tactical display as the swarm began forming their standard attack formations. They are wrong. Today, they learn why Earth was quarantined. Today, they learn what happens when Deathworlders decide to protect someone. All ships, engage the enemy. Let's introduce this galaxy to human warfare. The bridge of the Normandy erupted into controlled chaos as every station activated for combat. Weapon systems came online. Shields raised to full power, and targeting computers locked onto the approaching swarm. Throughout the human fleet, thousands of sailors and marines prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. Myra watched in fascination and terror as the humans transformed from diplomatic escorts into something far more dangerous. These weren't the peaceful, logical beings she was used to dealing with. These were apex predators, and they were about to remind the galaxy why some species were quarantined for everyone else's safety. The hunt was about to begin. The Korthak swarm descended on Villani Prime like a living nightmare made of metal and flesh. Millions of organic ships, each one the size of a city block, moved in perfect mathematical formation across the star system. Their approach was beautiful in its terrible efficiency, wave after wave of identical vessels following patterns that had conquered dozens of worlds without ever suffering a single defeat. They are following the same attack pattern they used on Zalara, Captain Martinez reported from her tactical station aboard the Normandy star. Scout drones first, then harvester ships, then the main swarm. Admiral Hayes watched the enemy formation on her tactical display, noting how every ship maintained precise distance from its neighbors. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risk. It was the kind of perfect coordination that only a hive mind could achieve. Predictable, she muttered. They are so used to fighting sheep, they don't know how to handle wolves. On the bridge of his own ship, Colonel Thompson was suiting up in powered armor alongside his Marines. The bulky exoskeleton was designed for Earth's crushing gravity and hostile environments, something no peaceful species in the galaxy had ever needed to develop. "Listen up, Jarheads," Thompson announced over the Marine communication channel. "In about 10 minutes, we're going to board alien ships filled with creatures that eat planets for breakfast. They've never fought anything that fought back, which means they're about to get a very unpleasant education." The Marines checked their weapons, not the elegant energy beams favored by galactic civilizations, but crude kinetic firearms that fired metal projectiles at hypersonic speeds. Weapons designed by a species that had spent millennia finding new ways to kill each other. Admiral Hayes gave her final orders as the swarm entered attack range. "All ships, execute scatter pattern Delta. Make it look random, but remember your positions. Martinez, are the calculations ready?" "Targeting solutions locked in, Admiral," Martinez replied, her fingers dancing over controls that would have baffled most alien technicians. "The moon's orbit is more unstable than we thought. One good push in the right place should do it." The 12 human ships suddenly broke formation, spreading across the system in what looked like complete chaos. To the swarm's hive mind, it appeared that the primitive Deathworlders were panicking and fleeing in random directions. The first wave of Korthak scouts moved in to investigate, expecting to find defensive platforms and evacuation ships. Instead, they found nothing but empty space and a few scattered vessels that seemed to be running away. That's when Admiral Hayes sprung her trap. "All ships, target the moon. Fire on my mark." She watched the tactical display as the swarm moved into position exactly where battle computers had predicted they would be. "Now!" The human fleet opened fire, but not on the enemy. Instead, their weapons, designed to crack asteroids and demolish space stations, focused on Villani Prime's smaller moon. The barrage hit precisely calculated stress points that Captain Martinez had identified using Earth's advanced geological modeling software. The moon cracked like an eggshell. Massive chunks of rock, some as large as mountains, broke free from a moon surface and began tumbling through space. But these weren't random debris. They followed carefully planned trajectories that turned them into devastating kinetic weapons. The first boulder, accelerated by the moon's gravity, smashed into a swarm formation at over 30,000 kilometers per hour. The impact vaporized dozens of organic ships and sent shockwaves through the hive mind's perfect coordination. Direct hit on Scout Formation Alpha, reported Weapons Officer Carl Peterson from his station. Enemy casualties estimated at 300 ships. But the real devastation was just beginning. As more lunar debris cascaded through the system, it created a chaotic field of spinning rocks and metal fragments that turned the swarm's orderly advance into a nightmare of collisions and destruction. The hive mind tried to adapt, but it had no programming for environmental warfare. Every calculation was based on fighting static defenses and predictable enemies. No one had ever weaponized an entire moon against them. "Marines, you're cleared for boarding operations," Admiral Hayes announced. "Thompson, take your people and show these bugs what human hospitality looks like." Transport ships launched from the human fleet, carrying Marines in powered armor toward the disabled swarm vessels. Colonel Thompson led the first wave, his team cutting through the hulls of alien ships with plasma torches and boarding axes. What they found inside was horrifying but not unexpected. The Korthak were creatures designed for consumption, not combat. They looked like giant insect crossed with industrial machinery, all cutting mandibles and acid-spitting organs, but no real weapons or armor. "These things are built for eating defenseless civilians," Thompson reported over the communication channel as his Marines systematically cleared each ship. "They've got no idea how to fight soldiers who shoot back." The powered armor that protected the Marines from Earth's crushing gravity made them nearly invulnerable to the Korthak's organic weapons. What would have dissolved a peaceful Villani in seconds barely scratched the hardened alloy plating. Meanwhile, Admiral Hayes watched the tactical display as the swarm's mothership, a massive creature the size of a small moon, began trying to retreat from the chaos. "Martinez, are you tracking the mothership?" Hayes asked. "Yes, Admiral. It's trying to reach the edge of the system where it can open a hyperspace portal." Hayes smiled grimly. "Target the asteroid belt. Let's give our guest a proper send-off." The human fleet turned their weapons on 3 carefully selected asteroids in the outer system. The coordinated explosion sent waves of gravitational distortion rippling through space, creating an invisible net that caught the retreating mothership like a fly in a web. The massive Korthak vessel found itself trapped, unable to escape the system's gravity, while as debris from its own destroyed fleet rained down around it. For the first time in its existence, the swarm had encountered prey that fought back harder than it could consume. Swarm mothership is disabled and trapped, Martinez reported. Remaining Korthak forces are in full retreat. Admiral Hayes stood on her bridge, watching as the most feared force in the galaxy fled from 12 human ships and a handful of exploded rocks. Sometimes, she reflected, the best weapons weren't the biggest or most advanced. They were the ones our enemy never saw coming. "Welcome to human warfare," she said quietly. "Population, you're screwed." 3 days after the battle that changed everything, Chancellor Myra stood beside Admiral Hayes on the observation deck of the Normandy *, watching something that had never happened before in galactic history. Human engineers in bulky work suits floated alongside graceful Vellani technicians, repairing damaged orbital platforms around Vellani Prime. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just a week ago, crewed Deathworlders working peacefully with one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "Look at them," Myra said, pointing to where a human engineer was teaching a group of young Vellani how to weld hull plating using portable plasma torches. "Your people are sharing technology that could revolutionize our construction industry." Admiral Hayes smiled as she watched the unlikely partnership developing outside. The humans were learning Vellani energy manipulation techniques while teaching the aliens about kinetic engineering and structural reinforcement. It was a kind of knowledge exchange that typically took decades of careful diplomacy to arrange. "Your engineers are quick learners," Hayes replied. "Give them a few months, and they'll be building stations that can survive anything short of a direct hit from a planet killer." In the distance, the Korthak mothership hung like a dead whale in space. The massive organic vessel, once capable of consuming entire worlds, now drifted powerless with its hive mind severed by precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. Human science teams were already aboard, studying the alien technology under heavy marine guard. "What will you do with it?" Myra asked, nodding toward the defeated mothership. "Learn everything we can," Hayes answered honestly. "The swarm's biotechnology is centuries ahead of anything we've seen. If we can understand how they grew ships instead of building them, it could change everything about space travel." Dr. Patricia Wells, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, had been sending regular reports about the Korthak specimens they'd captured. The creatures were fascinating in their specialization, perfect biological machines designed for a single purpose. But that same specialization had been their weakness when faced with human adaptability. Captain Martinez approached from the communication station, her face showing a mixture of excitement and concern. "Admiral, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Word about the battle has spread faster than our fastest ships could carry it." "What kind of messages?" Hayes asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Distress calls, mostly," Martinez replied, pulling up a holographic display showing dozens of star systems. "The Rigel Confederacy is asking for help against something called the Silicon Hunters. The Tau Ceti colonies are facing an invasion by machine intelligences, and the Arcturus Republic." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "They are offering us entire star systems if we'll protect them from their neighbors." Myra's 6 eyes widened in shock. "The Arcturians are offering you planets? They've never given up territory to anyone." Admiral Hayes studied the galactic map, watching as more distress signals appeared every few minutes. It seemed like every species in the galaxy had suddenly remembered all the threats they'd been ignoring or running from, now that they knew someone might actually fight back. "The galaxy is waking up," she said quietly. "For centuries, everyone's been so focused on avoiding conflict that they forgot how to face it when it came looking for them." The political implications were staggering. The Galactic Council, which had maintained peace through isolation and quarantine policies, was already sending urgent diplomatic messages to Earth. Species that had voted to quarantine Sol were now begging for human protection. Colonel Thompson's voice came over the communication system from the planet's surface. "Admiral, the embassy construction is ahead of schedule. The Vellani have volunteered half their engineering corps to help build it." The embassy was more than just a diplomatic building. It was humanity's first permanent presence in galactic civilization. But Admiral Hayes had made it clear that Earth's involvement would come with conditions that would make many species uncomfortable. "Patch me through to the Galactic Council," Hayes ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing representatives from dozens of species gathered in their grand chamber on the neutral world of Harmony Station. "Honored beings of the Galactic Council," Hayes began, her voice carrying across light years of space. "Earth accepts your invitation to join galactic civilization, but we will not be following the old rules." Murmurs of concern rippled through the alien assembly. These were beings who had spent centuries avoiding conflict through careful regulation and restriction. "No more quarantines based on fear," Hayes continued. "No more abandoning worlds because they are too dangerous or violent. The galaxy just learned what happens when you isolate potential allies. You also learn what happens when Deathworlders decide to protect instead of conquer." Elder Council of X, a tall crystalline being from the core worlds, spoke with obvious nervousness. "Admiral Hayes, surely you understand the necessity of containing aggressive species for the greater good." Hayes smiled, and even through the holographic transmission, it made several counselors step backward. "Counselor, the Korthax swarm consumed 17 worlds while you debated whether to classify them as a threat. How's that containment policy working out for you?" Within weeks, Colonel Thompson had established the Sol Defense Corps on Valani Prime. Volunteers from across the galaxy arrived daily, young beings from peaceful species who wanted to learn how to fight back against the threats their government preferred to ignore. The training was brutal by galactic standards, but necessary. "Learn from the best predators" became the core motto. Become the galaxy's protectors. As Admiral Hayes prepared to return to Earth with most of her fleet, leaving behind a small garrison and the promise of protection, Chancellor Mara asked her one final question that had been weighing on her mind since the battle ended. "Why did you come, Admiral? We were complete strangers to you. Your people had nothing to gain by risking their lives for us." Hayes looked out at the stars, where communication arrays were already lighting up with distress signals from species who now knew that someone would answer their call for help. "Because that's what family does, Chancellor," she replied simply. "And like it or not, this galaxy just became our family. Earth spent centuries in isolation, thinking we were too dangerous for civilized space. Turns out, we weren't too dangerous. We were exactly what civilization needed. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human guardianship had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk the END asterisk.